His car died in the storm, enemies closing in, and the waitress who stopped to help had no idea she'd just saved the most dangerous man in the city. The Mercedes went dead at exactly 11:47 p.m., on a stretch of county road so dark the rain looked like static, and Kelly Wilson, the man who controlled half the city's underground, realized he was about to die in the mud like a dog. His hands gripped the steering wheel as the engine coughed its last breath, dashboard lights flickering once, twice, then nothing. Behind him, maybe 2 miles back, headlights cut through the storm. The Santos cartel, closing in fast. He'd been running for 30 minutes, bleeding from a shoulder wound, his phone shattered from the firefight at the warehouse. This was it, the king brought down by a blown fuel line and bad timing. Kelly kicked open the door and stumbled into the rain, cold water mixing with blood, his expensive suit ruined. He reached for the gun in his waistband, checking the clip. 6 rounds left. Not enough. Never enough. He looked down the empty road, nothing but darkness and rain, and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years, fear. Then, through the sheets of rain, headlights appeared from the opposite direction. A beat-up Honda Civic, sputtering and slow, the kind of car held together by prayers and duct tape. It slowed, stopped. The window rolled down, and a woman's voice cut through the storm. "Hi stranger, you need help?" Kelly's hand instinctively moved to his gun, but when he saw her face, exhausted, kind, completely unaware she was talking to the most wanted man in the state, something in him hesitated. She wore a diner uniform, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes heavy with the weight of a double shift. She had no idea who he was. No idea what was coming down that road behind him. "You're hurt," she said, leaning forward to see the blood on his shoulder. "Get in. I can't leave you out here." "You should drive away," Kelly said, his voice low, dangerous. "Right now." She shook her head, unlocking the passenger door. "Nobody deserves to die alone in the rain. Get in." Kelly looked back at the road, at the distant headlights growing closer, then at this stranger who was risking everything without knowing it. Every instinct screamed danger, but something in her tired, kind face made him holster his weapon and open the door. She drove him to a small house on the edge of town, barely more than a shack with peeling paint and a chain-link fence. Inside, it was warm, clean, lived in. Family photos on the walls. A sink full of dishes. Bills stacked on the counter. A life of honest struggle. "Sit," she said, pointing to the couch. "I'll get the first aid kit." Kelly sat, watching her move through her small home with quiet dignity. She didn't ask his name. Didn't ask what happened. Just cleaned his wound with steady hands, gave him dry clothes, her late father's flannel shirt. And heated up leftover meatloaf on the stove. "You don't know me," Kelly said finally, his voice rough. "No," she agreed, setting a plate in front of him. "But I know what it's like to need help and not have anyone to ask." She walked to the kitchen, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Kelly looked down at the food, at the borrowed clothes, at the woman who'd saved his life without asking for anything in return. He didn't know her name yet. But Loretta Luis had just given the most dangerous man in the city shelter from the storm, and a reason to believe in something other than violence. And that changed everything. Outside, 2 blocks away, the Santos cartel's SUVs rolled slowly down the street, searching. Inside the house, Kelly Wilson closed his eyes and fell asleep for the first time in days, unaware that the woman who'd saved him was about to become the most important person in his world, and the most vulnerable target in his war. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in. The ambush happened fast. 1 second Kelly was collecting payment from the dockyard, the next his men were dropping like flies. The Santos cartel didn't play fair, they never did, but this was coordinated. Planned. Someone had sold him out. Kelly took a bullet to the shoulder breaking through their line, his Mercedes screaming down the industrial road while gunfire shattered the back windshield. His phone was in pieces on the passenger seat. Marcus was dead. Trey was dead. He was alone, bleeding, and running on instinct. The engine started making that sound at mile marker 42. A grinding, dying wheeze that Kelly knew meant trouble. He pushed the gas harder, but the car was giving up. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, oil pressure, engine temperature, every warning light screaming failure. "Come on," he growled, slamming his palm against the wheel. "Not now. Not tonight." But the Mercedes didn't care about his survival. It coughed once, twice, and died. Kelly coasted to the shoulder of the county road, rain hammering the roof, and sat in the sudden silence. His rearview mirror showed nothing yet, but they were coming. He could feel it. He checked his gun. 6 rounds. He pressed his hand to his shoulder wound, blood seeping through his fingers, warm and sticky. This was how it ended, then. Kelly Wilson, the man who'd ruled this city for a decade, bleeding out on a back road in the rain. He stepped out into the storm, water soaking through his ruined suit immediately. The road stretched in both directions, empty and black. No streetlights. No houses. Nothing. He limped to the front of the car, popped the hood, and stared at the engine like it might magically fix itself. It didn't. Behind him, distant headlights appeared. Too far to tell if it was the cartel or some unlucky civilian. Kelly pulled his gun, chambering around, and waited. If this was death coming, he'd meet it standing. But the headlights were coming from the wrong direction. A beat-up Honda Civic rattled toward him, headlights flickering, engine sounding like it was held together with hope. It slowed. Kelly's finger moved to the trigger. The car stopped 20 feet away. The window rolled down. "Hi, stranger," a woman's voice called through the rain. "You need help?" Kelly stared at her, rain dripping down his face, gun hidden behind his leg. She was young, black, wearing a diner uniform with her hair pulled back. She looked exhausted. She looked kind. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. "You should keep driving," Kelly said, his voice cold. She leaned forward, squinting at him through the rain. "You're bleeding. Get in. I can't just leave you out here." "Yes, you can." "Well, I won't." She unlocked the passenger door. "Get in before you pass out." Kelly looked back down the empty road. The cartel was coming. This woman was offering him a lifeline he didn't deserve. He should refuse. He should send her away. He should die here like he'd always known he would. Instead, he opened the door and got in. Loretta's house was small, the kind of place that apologized for existing. Peeling paint on the outside, chain link fence half collapsed, a porch light that flickered like it was thinking about giving up. But inside, it was warm. Clean. Lived in. Kelly stood dripping in her entryway, blood still seeping through his shirt, while she locked the door behind them and flipped 3 deadbolts. She noticed him watching and shrugged. "Neighborhood's not great," she said simply, then moved past him. "Sit on the couch. I'll get towels." Kelly didn't sit. He scanned the room with the trained eye of a man who'd walked into 100 traps. Family photos on the walls, a woman who must have been her mother, a man in a mechanic's uniform with his arm around a younger Loretta. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter, some stamped red with final notice. A life of honest struggle, no art, no pretension, just survival. She returned with towels and a first aid kit that looked like it had seen better days. "Shirt off," she said, setting everything on the coffee table. Kelly hesitated. The tattoos covering his torso told stories he didn't want to explain. The Wilson family crest on his chest. The names of dead brothers down his ribs. The kill count on his shoulder blade that he'd stopped updating years ago. But she was already turning away, giving him privacy he didn't ask for. "I'll get you something dry to wear." He peeled off his ruined shirt, wincing as fabric pulled at the wound. She returned with a flannel shirt, faded and worn, smelling like laundry detergent and old memories. "My dad's," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "He passed 3 years ago. You look about his size." Kelly took the shirt but didn't put it on yet. She knelt in front of him with the first aid kit, hands steady despite the situation. She cleaned the wound without flinching, packed it with gauze, wrapped it tight. Her fingers were calloused, working hands, hands that knew how to fix things. "Bullet went through," she said. "You're lucky. Infection's your biggest worry now." "You do this often?" Kelly asked, voice low. "Patch up bleeding strangers?" She almost smiled. "First time. But my dad taught me field medicine. Said you never know when you'll need it." She taped down the bandage and sat back. "I'm Loretta, by the way. Loretta Louise." "Kelly," he said, because giving her his last name felt like handing her a loaded gun. She stood, gathering the bloody gauze. "You hungry, Kelly? I've got leftover meatloaf." He should say no. He should leave. Every second he stayed put her in danger. The Santos cartel had resources, cameras, informants. They'd track his car eventually, run the plates, canvass the area. And when they found this address, they'd come through that door like the hand of God. But Loretta was already in the kitchen, heating food she probably couldn't afford to share, humming something soft under her breath. She hadn't asked what happened. Hadn't asked why he was bleeding. Hadn't looked at his tattoos with recognition or fear. She just helped. Kelly pulled on the flannel shirt, the fabric foreign against his skin. When was the last time someone had given him something without wanting something back? When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen a person instead of a weapon? Loretta set a plate in front of him, meatloaf and green beans, simple and warm. She sat across from him with her own plate, exhaustion written in every line of her face. "You don't have to tell me," she said quietly. "Whatever happened tonight, but you're safe here, for now." Kelly looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something crack in his chest. She had no idea what she'd invited into her home. No idea that the man sitting at her table had killed more people than she'd probably met in her lifetime. And somehow, that made it worse. Kelly woke to silence, which was wrong. He'd trained himself to sleep light, to wake at the smallest sound, but somehow he'd gone under deep. The couch still smelled like detergent and old fabric, and weak dawn light filtered through thin curtains. He sat up fast, hand reaching for his gun on the coffee table, and immediately regretted it. His shoulder screamed in protest, the wound tight and hot under fresh bandages. Loretta must have changed them while he slept. The thought unsettled him more than it should. The house was empty. No sounds from the kitchen, no movement upstairs. Kelly stood, pulled on his shoes, and moved to the window. His Mercedes was still in the driveway, hood propped open, and someone was bent over the engine. Someone in coveralls. Kelly stepped onto the porch, morning air cool and damp from last night's rain. Loretta was elbow deep in his engine, a toolbox open on the ground beside her, parts laid out in careful order on a clean rag. She wore her father's coveralls, hair tied back, grease already smudged on her forearm. She didn't look up when he approached. "Fuel lines shot," she said, voice matter of fact. "Probably took damage when you hit something. Amazing you made it as far as you did." Kelly stopped at the edge of the driveway, watching her work. Her hands moved with confidence, disconnecting hoses, removing the damaged line, measuring it against a replacement she'd pulled from somewhere. No hesitation, no second guessing. "You know cars," he said. "My dad owned a shop," Loretta replied, fitting the new fuel line into place. "Luis Auto Repair, 2 blocks from here. I grew up in that garage. Could rebuild an engine before I could drive." She tightened a clamp with practiced efficiency. "He taught me everything," said a woman who can fix her own car doesn't need to rely on anybody. Kelly watched her thread the line through the engine bay, her movements precise and methodical. This wasn't amateur tinkering. This was professional grade work. "Where'd you get the parts?" "Dad's garage." She gestured to the detached building behind her house, its doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. "Still got most of his inventory. I keep telling myself I'll reopen the shop someday, but..." She trailed off, reconnecting the fuel pump. Life gets in the way. 20 minutes later, she wiped her hands on a rag and stepped back. "Try it now." Kelly slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The Mercedes roared to life, engine purring like nothing had ever been wrong. He stared at the dashboard, every gauge reading normal, and something shifted in his chest. She'd saved him last night. Given him shelter, food, medical care. And now she'd fixed his car with parts from her dead father's garage, asking for nothing, expecting nothing. Kelly stepped out of the car, and Loretta was already packing up tools, avoiding his eyes. She knew, maybe not who he was specifically, but she knew he was dangerous. Knew whatever he'd been running from last night would probably come back. And she'd helped him anyway. "Loretta," he said. She looked up, wiping grease from her fingers. Why? She understood the question. Why help a bleeding stranger? Why risk everything for someone she'd never see again? She was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "My dad used to say we're all just one bad night away from needing help. And when that night comes, you hope somebody stops." She handed him the toolbox. "Put this back in the garage for me?" Kelly took it, their fingers brushing for half a second. He wanted to tell her the truth. Wanted to warn her. Wanted to explain that helping him might have been the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. Instead, he opened his glove box, pulled out a thick stack of cash, and held it out to her. Loretta looked at the money like it was a snake. "No. It's for the parts. The work." I said no. Her voice went cold. "I didn't help you for money, Kelly. I helped you because it was raining and you were hurt and nobody else was going to stop." She stepped back, crossing her arms. "If you want to pay me back, just don't die from infection." Kelly stood there, cash in hand, completely disarmed. In his world, everything had a price. Loyalty, silence, protection, all bought and paid for. But this woman had saved his life twice and wouldn't take $1. "I owe you," he said finally. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," Kelly said, voice quiet and dangerous. "I do." Kelly stood in Loretta's driveway holding a stack of hundreds that could have paid her rent for 6 months, and she was looking at him like he'd just insulted her mother. "Put that away," she said, her voice sharp. "It's for the parts. The work. Your time. I don't want your money." She turned back toward the house, coveralls streaked with grease and morning dew. "You should go before the neighbors start asking questions." Kelly followed her, the cash still in his hand. "You spent your supplies fixing my car. Let me pay you back." Loretta spun around, and the exhaustion in her face had been replaced with something fiercer. "You think that's what this was? A transaction?" She gestured at the Mercedes, at her house, at the space between them. "I didn't help you for money, Kelly. I helped you because it was raining and you were hurt and nobody else was going to stop. That's it. That's the whole reason. People don't just help. Maybe not in your world." She crossed her arms. "But in mine, sometimes you help people because it's the right thing to do. No strings, no debt, no payback." Kelly stared at her, this small woman in coveralls who'd just rebuilt his fuel line and was now refusing enough money to change her life. In his world, everything had a price. Loyalty was bought. Silence was purchased. Protection came with interest. But Loretta Luis operated on a frequency he didn't understand. "What's your full name?" he asked quietly. "You already know it. Loretta Luis. And you live here alone?" Her jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." He glanced at the house, at the bills on the counter visible through the window, at the diner uniform hanging by the door. She worked doubles to keep this place. Drove a car held together with hope. Gave away her father's parts to fix a stranger's Mercedes. And she wouldn't take a single dollar. Kelly put the cash back in his pocket, and something in Loretta's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I owe you a debt," he said. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes." His voice dropped, dangerous and certain. "I do." There was something in his eyes that made Loretta step back, not from fear exactly, but from the intensity of it. Like he'd just made a promise carved in stone, and she'd somehow become the center of something she didn't understand. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Kelly pulled his car keys from his pocket. "Someone you should forget about." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you." He moved toward the Mercedes, then stopped. "The men I was running from last night, they're dangerous. If they come asking questions, I'll tell them I never saw you. Don't lie to them. Just say you helped a stranger and he left. Nothing more." Loretta nodded slowly, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold despite the warming morning. "Will I see you again?" Kelly opened the car door, every instinct screaming at him to say no, to drive away and never look back, to keep her safe by staying gone. But when he looked at her standing in her driveway, coveralls and grease and quiet strength, something in his chest pulled tight. "I don't know," he said, which was the truth. He slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring perfectly under her expert hands. Loretta stood watching as he backed out of the driveway, and Kelly caught her face in the rearview mirror, confusion and concern written in equal measure. He drove 3 blocks before pulling over, hands gripping the steering wheel, shoulder throbbing, mind racing. He'd been in this business 15 years. Killed his first man at 19. Built an empire on fear and violence and absolute control. He didn't owe anyone anything because he made sure of it. But Loretta Luis had given him shelter, patched his wounds, fixed his car, and asked for nothing. And now he owed her everything. Kelly pulled out his phone, cracked screen flickering to life, and dialed Marcus's second in command. "Boss?" Dante's voice came through, relief and shock mixing. "We thought you were dead." "I need a address run," Kelly said. "Loretta Luis." And I need protection on that location, eyes only, no contact. If anyone even looks at her house wrong, I want to know about it. Who is she? Kelly looked in the rearview mirror at the empty road behind him, at the path back to her house that he'd already memorized. She's someone I owe. He ended the call, pulled back onto the road, and drove toward his headquarters. Toward his war. Toward everything he'd built. But part of him had stayed behind in that driveway, standing in front of a woman who'd saved his life and wouldn't take his money. And Kelly Wilson didn't know how to live with that. If this story has you hooked, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon. You won't want to miss what happens next. Let's continue. Kelly walked into his headquarters at 8:47 a.m. looking like he'd crawled out of a grave. Blood-soaked flannel shirt, mud on his shoes, 3 days of exhaustion carved into his face. The room went silent. 20 men stopped mid-conversation, cards frozen in hands, weapons halfway through cleaning. Dante recovered first, crossing the room in 4 strides. Boss. Jesus Christ, we thought. Where's Marcus? Kelly's voice was flat. The silence got heavier. Dante's jaw tightened. Didn't make it, boss. Trey neither. Santos hit us with everything. We lost 6 good men. Kelly nodded once, filing the grief away in the same locked box where he kept everything that made him human. Get me a clean shirt and everyone in the war room. 10 minutes. He moved through the building like a ghost, men parting for him instinctively. In his private office, he stripped off Loretta's father's flannel and stared at it for longer than he should. It smelled like laundry detergent and motor oil. Like her house. Like safety. He folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer. 10 minutes later, Kelly stood at the head of the table, city map spread in front of him, his remaining lieutenants watching with the focused attention of men who knew their boss had just survived the impossible. Santos made a mistake, Kelly said quietly. They tried to bury me and failed. Now we're going to remind them why that was stupid. He laid out the plan with surgical precision. Hit their distribution centers first, cut off their cash flow. Take out their lieutenants one by one, make them feel the losses. Save Mateo Santos for last, make him watch his empire collapse before putting a bullet in his skull. It was elegant. Brutal. Exactly the kind of systematic destruction Kelly was known for. But his mind kept drifting. To coveralls and grease-stained hands. To a woman who'd refused $10,000 like it was an insult. To the way Loretta had looked at him in her driveway, confused and concerned and completely unaware she'd just saved the life of the city's most wanted man. Boss? Dante was watching him carefully. You with us? Kelly refocused. We move tonight. I want 3 teams ready by sundown. And Dante, I need eyes on an address. He wrote it down, slid the paper across. Protection detail, distant surveillance only. Nobody approaches, nobody makes contact. If anyone sniffs around that location, I want to know immediately. Dante glanced at the address, then back at Kelly. Who lives there? Someone who helped me, Kelly said, and the tone in his voice made it clear the conversation was over. Loretta stood behind the diner counter at 3 p.m., pouring coffee she didn't remember pouring, taking orders she forgot 30 seconds later. Her mind was still in her driveway, watching a stranger named Kelly drive away with intensity in his eyes that promised something she didn't understand. Girl, you gonna tell me what's wrong or keep burning yourself on that pot? Her coworker, Shanice, was watching her with concern. Loretta looked down. She'd been holding the coffee pot against her wrist, hot glass against skin. She set it down quickly. I'm fine. Just tired. You're always tired. This is different. Shanice lowered her voice. This about that man I saw leaving your street this morning? Big fancy car, looked like trouble? Loretta's stomach dropped. You saw him? Baby, everybody saw him. Mercedes like that don't roll through our neighborhood unless someone's collecting debts or looking for trouble. Shanice squeezed her hand. Please tell me you didn't get mixed up in something. I just helped someone, Loretta said quietly. That's all. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The way Kelly had looked at her, the promise in his voice when he said I owe you a debt, the careful way he'd folded those bills back into his pocket like her refusal had surprised him, none of that was simple. She'd helped someone dangerous. And somehow, she knew he was coming back. 3 blocks from the diner, in an unmarked sedan, 2 of Kelly's men watched the entrance through tinted windows. One took photos. The other made notes. Neither one moved when Loretta's shift ended and she walked to her beat-up Honda, exhausted and lost in thought. They just watched, waiting for threats that hadn't appeared yet, but would. Chapter 6. The two men walked into the diner at 4:30 p.m. wearing suits too expensive for the neighborhood and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Loretta was wiping down table 6 when they slid into a booth by the window, and something in her stomach twisted. "Be right with you," she called, keeping her voice steady. She finished wiping, grabbed menus, and approached their table. Up close, they looked worse. One had a scar running from his ear to his jaw. The other wore rings on every finger, the kind that left marks when you hit someone. "Coffee?" she asked. "Information," Scarface said, still smiling. "We're looking for someone. Big guy, maybe came through here 2 nights ago. Driving a black Mercedes S-Class. You see anybody like that?" Loretta's heart hammered against her ribs, but she'd grown up in this neighborhood. She knew how to play dumb. "Mister, I see 100 people a night. Can't remember every car in the parking lot." Rings leaned forward. "This one you'd remember. Expensive car, looked out of place. Might have been hurt, bleeding maybe. He stop here for help?" "Nobody like that." Loretta shrugged, pen poised over her order pad. "You want coffee or not?" Scarface pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. It was Kelly, but cleaner, colder, standing in front of what looked like a warehouse with other men in suits. He looked exactly like what he was, dangerous. "Never seen him," Loretta said, meeting Scarface's eyes without flinching. "You sure about that?" Rings asked quietly. "Because lying to us would be a very bad decision." Before Loretta could answer, Shanice appeared at her elbow, all 5'2" of her bristling with protective fury. "Gentlemen, if you're not ordering, you need to leave. We reserve tables for paying customers." Scarface looked at Shanice like she was an insect, then back at Loretta. He placed a business card on the table. "You remember anything, you call that number. There's money in it for helpful information." They stood and walked out, the bell above the door ringing cheerfully behind them. Loretta realized she'd been holding her breath. "Girl." Shanice grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back. "Those were Santos cartel. I've seen them around, collecting debts, hurting people." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That man you helped? I think he's bad news. Serious bad news." Loretta nodded, throat tight. "I know. Then why do you look scared for him instead of scared of him?" Loretta didn't have an answer. Her house looked normal when she pulled into the driveway at 11 p.m. Porch light flickering. Chain link fence still broken. Everything exactly as she'd left it. Except the front door was open, just a crack, enough to show darkness inside. Loretta sat in her car, engine idling, hands frozen on the wheel. She'd locked that door, triple-checked it like always. Someone had been inside. Someone might still be inside. She should call the police. Should drive away. Should do anything except what she was about to do. Instead, she grabbed the tire iron from her trunk and walked toward her front door. The living room was trashed. Couch cushions slashed open, stuffing everywhere. Kitchen drawers pulled out and dumped. Someone had gone through everything, looking for something. Looking for evidence that Kelly had been here. Loretta moved through the destruction, tire iron raised, checking every room. Empty. Whoever had done this was gone. But they'd left a message. A photo of Kelly, the same one Scarface had shown her, pinned to her refrigerator with a kitchen knife. On the back, written in marker, "We know he was here. Tell us where he is, or you're next." Loretta's hands shook as she pulled the knife free. She should be furious. Should regret ever stopping on that rain-soaked road. Should curse Kelly's name for bringing this nightmare to her door. Instead, she found herself wondering if he was safe. If the Santos cartel had found him yet. If he'd survived whatever war he'd gone back to fight. She sank onto her destroyed couch, surrounded by the wreckage of her quiet life, and realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Not in helping Kelly, she'd do that again in a heartbeat. But in thinking she could return to normal after meeting someone like him. Outside, in the unmarked sedan 3 houses down, Kelly's surveillance team was already on the phone. "Boss, we've got a problem. Santos just hit her house." Kelly was 3 blocks away when Dante called. "Boss, Santos hit her house. She's inside, alone. We've got eyes but I'm already coming." Kelly ended the call, pressed the accelerator to the floor, and the Mercedes roared through the quiet streets like a missile. Behind him, 2 SUVs full of his men struggled to keep up. He pulled onto Loretta's street to find a black sedan in her driveway, engine still warm, 2 men visible through her living room window. Not his surveillance team. Santos enforcers, armed and searching. Kelly was out of the car before it fully stopped, gun drawn, moving with the cold precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He didn't knock. He put 2 bullets through the door lock and kicked it open. The first man turned, reaching for his weapon. Kelly shot him twice in the chest before he cleared leather. The second man got his gun up, managed one wild shot that punched through the wall, and then Kelly was on him. He slammed the man's head into the kitchen counter with enough force to crack tile, disarmed him with brutal efficiency, and put a bullet in his knee. The man screamed. "How many?" Kelly asked, voice flat. Just us, please." Kelly shot him in the other knee. "How many know about her?" "Everyone. Mateo's got her address, her work schedule, everything. Please, God." Kelly put the final bullet between his eyes and straightened, scanning the house. Where was she? "Loretta," he called out. Movement from the back. The garage door cracked open, and Loretta emerged holding a tire iron, her face pale, eyes wide. She took in the scene, 2 bodies, blood spreading across her floor, Kelly standing in the middle of it with a gun still smoking in his hand. She looked at him like she'd never seen him before. Kelly's men poured through the front door, weapons drawn, moving with military precision to secure the scene. Dante started barking orders. "Clean this up. I want these bodies gone in 10 minutes. No trace." Loretta watched them work with growing horror. They moved like a machine, professional and cold, wrapping bodies in plastic, scrubbing blood, erasing evidence of violence like it was routine. Like they'd done this 100 times. "Get out," she whispered. Kelly holstered his gun. "Loretta, get out of my house." She was shaking now, tire iron still gripped in white-knuckled hands. "All of you, get out." Kelly nodded to his men. They filed out silently, taking the bodies with them, leaving just the 2 of them standing in her destroyed living room. The violence was gone, but its ghost remained in every bloodstain they'd missed, every bullet hole in her walls. Loretta walked up to him and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked through the silence. Kelly's head turned with the blow, but he didn't move otherwise. Didn't raise a hand. Didn't flinch. He just took it, jaw tight, and when he looked back at her, his eyes were empty of everything except certainty. "You brought this to my door," Loretta said, voice breaking. "I helped you, and you brought killers to my house. She couldn't finish. "I know. You know? That's all you have to say?" "No." Kelly's voice was quiet, dangerous. "I did this. I brought them here. And now I'm going to finish it." "Finish what?" "The Santos cartel. Every single one of them who knows your name, who has your address, who even thought about touching you." He stepped closer, and Loretta saw something in his face that terrified her more than the bodies had. Cold purpose. Absolute resolve. "I'm going to erase them, Loretta. All of them. And when it's done, you'll be safe. I don't want you to kill people for me. It's already done." Kelly pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Mateo Santos, bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, blood running down his face. "He's the one who ordered this. Gave them your address. Told them to make you talk." He pocketed the phone. "I'm going to finish this tonight, and he's going to watch his empire burn before I end him." Loretta stared at him, this man she'd saved, this stranger she'd given shelter. He wasn't broken down anymore. Wasn't vulnerable. This was Kelly Wilson in his element, cold, lethal, terrifying. A king in his kingdom of violence. "Who are you?" she whispered. Kelly looked at her for a long moment, and something like regret flickered in his eyes. "Someone you should have left in the rain." He turned toward the door. "Kelly." He stopped. "Don't die," Loretta said quietly. "Whatever you're about to do, don't die doing it." Kelly looked back at her, and for just a second, the coldness cracked. "I won't." Then he was gone, and Loretta was alone in her destroyed house, surrounded by the wreckage of a kindness that had cost her everything. The war lasted 3 days and painted the city red. Kelly started with the distribution centers, hitting them at 2 a.m. when they were most vulnerable. 12 locations across the city, all burning by dawn. The Santos cartel's cash flow dried up overnight, millions of dollars turning to ash and smoke. Day 2, he went after the lieutenants. Surgical strikes, no witnesses, bodies left as messages in places Mateo would find them. Carlos, who'd ordered the hit on Loretta's diner. Miguel, who'd searched her house. Rafael, who'd provided her address. One by one, Kelly erased them from existence. The city's underworld watched in terrified silence. This wasn't business. This was personal. Kelly Wilson had always been ruthless, but this was something else, systematic annihilation executed with cold precision. He moved through the Santos organization like a scalpel, cutting away everything infected, leaving nothing but fear in his wake. By day 3, Mateo Santos was alone. Kelly found him in his penthouse, surrounded by empty rooms where guards used to stand. Mateo had a gun on the table, contemplating his options. Kelly walked in through the unlocked door and sat across from him. "You should have left her alone," Kelly said quietly. Mateo laughed, bitter and broken. "I didn't even know who she was. Just some waitress who helped you. A loose end." "She wasn't a loose end. She was the only person in this city who helped me without wanting something back." Kelly leaned forward. "And you terrorized her, sent men to her work, broke into her home, put a knife through her refrigerator with my picture on it. I was looking for you. You found me." Kelly pulled his gun, set it on the table between them. "Now you get to watch everything you built disappear." He showed Mateo the phone. Photos of burning warehouses, dead lieutenants, seized shipments, frozen accounts. 3 days of systematic destruction. The Santos cartel was gone, wiped from the city's underworld like it had never existed. Mateo looked at the photos, then at Kelly. "Just do it." Kelly picked up the gun. One shot. Clean. Final. The man who'd threatened Loretta was erased, and Kelly felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just emptiness. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city he controlled. He'd won. Eliminated every threat. Proved once again that crossing Kelly Wilson meant death. His reputation was absolute now, untouchable. But all he could think about was Loretta. The way she'd looked at him in her destroyed living room, horror and disappointment mixing in equal measure. The slap that he'd deserved. The tire iron in her hands, ready to defend herself because he'd brought violence to her door. He'd spent 3 days killing for her, and she'd probably never forgive him for it. Kelly pulled out his phone, called Dante. "Status on her house? Cleaned, repaired, new locks installed. We replaced everything they destroyed. She hasn't been back since that night, staying with a friend, we think." "And the diner? We've had eyes on it 24/7. No threats. Santos is finished, boss. Anyone who knew about her is gone." Kelly should have felt victorious. Should have felt the rush of absolute power that came with eliminating an entire organization. Instead, he just felt tired. "Pull the surveillance," he said quietly. "Boss? She's safe now. Pull the team. Let her go back to her life." He ended the call and stared at his reflection in the penthouse window. This was who he was, a man who solved problems with violence, who protected people by destroying their enemies, who didn't know how to care for something without crushing it in his grip. Loretta had given him shelter, fixed his car, refused his money. She'd shown him kindness without transaction, help without strings. And he'd repaid her by turning her life into a war zone. Kelly left the penthouse, left Mateo's body for his men to handle, and drove through the early morning streets. He found himself on Loretta's road, idling 3 houses down, watching her small house with its new locks and repaired door. The light was off. She wasn't home. He should drive away, should leave her alone, should let her return to the quiet life he'd shattered. That would be the kindest thing, to disappear like she'd asked, to become a nightmare she could eventually forget. But Kelly had never been kind. He'd been ruthless, efficient, cold. He'd built an empire on fear and violence. But somewhere in the last 3 days of blood and fire, he'd realized something that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. He didn't just owe Loretta a debt. He wanted her in his life. Not as an obligation, not as something to protect from a distance, but as something real, something his, something worth more than the empire he'd built. And that changed everything. If you've made it this far, you're part of something special. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Loretta was watering the struggling tomato plant on her porch when the convoy arrived. 5 black SUVs rolling down her street in formation, windows tinted, moving with military precision. Her neighbors stopped mid-conversation. Children froze on bikes. The entire block went silent. The vehicles stopped in front of her house, engines idling, and Loretta's heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. Kelly had finished his war, and now he was coming to finish her, the last loose end, the witness who knew too much. She set down the watering can with shaking hands and waited. The rear door of the center SUV opened, and Kelly stepped out. He wore a black suit, perfectly tailored, looking every inch the king he was. Behind him, men emerged from the other vehicles, 20, maybe 30 of them, armed and dangerous, forming a semicircle around her driveway. Loretta gripped the porch railing. Kelly. He walked toward her alone, his crew staying back, and stopped at the bottom of her porch steps. Up close, he looked different. Tired, older somehow, like the last 3 days had aged him years. Loretta Louise, he said quietly. I came back to pay my debt. Your debt is paid, she said, forcing her voice steady. You killed everyone who threatened me. We're even. No. Kelly removed his suit jacket, handed it to Dante without looking, and did something that made Loretta's breath catch. He went down on one knee on her driveway, in front of his entire crew, in front of her watching neighbors, and pulled a small box from his pocket. What are you doing? Loretta whispered. Kelly opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple and beautiful, a single diamond that caught the afternoon light. I came back to pay my debt. Not with money, not with protection, with everything I have. He looked up at her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before, vulnerability. Marry me, Loretta. Let me give you the life you deserve. Let me protect you. Let me be yours. Loretta stared at him, at this man who'd brought violence to her door and then eliminated every threat with brutal efficiency. At the ring in his hand. At his crew standing silent behind him, witnessing their king kneel before a waitress. You're insane, she breathed. Probably. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But I'm also certain. You don't even know me. I know you stopped for a stranger in the rain. I know you fixed my car with your father's parts and wouldn't take $1. I know you slapped me when I deserved it and told me not to die when you should have cursed my name. Kelly's voice dropped. I know you're the only person who ever helped me and asked for nothing. You saw me broken down and didn't drive past. You're the only real thing I've ever known. Kelly, I'm a waitress. I live paycheck to paycheck. I drive a car that's held together with hope. What could you possibly want with someone like me? Everything. He said it with absolute certainty. I want your mornings and your evenings. I want to help you rebuild your father's garage and watch you fix engines with grease on your hands. I want to wake up next to someone who sees me as a man, not a monster. I want to learn how to be human again, and I want you to teach me. Tears burned in Loretta's eyes. Your world is violent, dangerous. People die around you. They won't touch you. Never again. I'll burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you. He paused. But if you say no, I'll disappear. I'll leave you alone, set you up somewhere safe where my world can't reach, and you'll never see me again. The choice is yours. Loretta looked at him, really looked at him. At the scars on his knuckles. At the tattoos visible above his collar. At the crew of dangerous men waiting silently behind him. This was Kelly Wilson's world, brutal, unforgiving, soaked in blood. But she also saw the way he'd folded her father's flannel shirt. The way he'd taken her slap without flinching. The way he'd kept his promise to finish the threat, even though it had cost him 3 days of war. The way he was kneeling in her driveway, offering her everything, risking rejection in front of his entire crew. Why me? She whispered. Really, why me? Kelly's answer was simple, honest, devastating. Because when I was bleeding in the rain, thinking I was going to die, you stopped. And when I had nothing to offer but danger, you gave me shelter. You fixed me twice, Loretta. Once with your hands, once with your heart. And I've been yours ever since. Loretta stepped down from the porch, her heart hammering, and took his hand. I have conditions. Anything. I keep my house, my garage, my independence. I'm not a possession to be owned. Never. And you learn to fix things instead of breaking them. Starting with that tomato plant you're kneeling next to. Kelly looked at the struggling plant, then back at her. Deal. Then yes. She pulled him to his feet. Yes, Kelly Wilson. I'll marry you. The crew erupted in applause and whistles. Dante was grinning. A few men were actually wiping their eyes. But Kelly only had eyes for Loretta as he slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. 6 months later, Loretta stood in her father's garage, now fully restored and operational, watching Kelly struggle with a carburetor. He was covered in grease, swearing softly, his expensive watch traded for a simple band that wouldn't get caught in machinery. "You're doing it wrong," she said, grinning. "I'm doing exactly what you told me." "Then you weren't listening." She moved beside him, guiding his hands. Gentle pressure. "You can't force it." Kelly followed her guidance, and the part slid into place perfectly. He looked at her, covered in grease and sunlight, and felt something he'd never felt in his violent life, peace. "I love you," he said. Loretta kissed him, tasting motor oil and redemption. "I know. Now hand me that wrench. This engine won't fix itself." And Kelly Wilson, former king of the city's underworld, handed his wife a wrench and learned that fixing things was so much better than breaking them. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes in second chances and love that transforms. Thank you for being here. Until next time.